you doing, Paranormal Peeps? I'm your host, Charlie, and my co host tonight is.
Diego.
And tonight we have a very special guest on our show. In fact, he's going to be our first ever real guest. His name is Ray. How are you doing, Ray?
Pretty good, brother. Good to hear from you guys. I'm excited to be on your show.
No, we're excited to have you.
Exactly. Um, So, before we get into the meat of the discussion here, I'm gonna have to go ahead and ask. I kind of hate doing this, but you know how algorithms are. Um, if you like this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. But if you don't want to do all three, make sure you at least do one of them. So we can continue providing more content to you, the viewer. So, Ray, if you want to go ahead, so as you know, this is a paranormal podcast. So let's just go ahead and go with our first question. Tell us a little about yourself, so we know about your character and you know how you are, like as a person.
No problem, man. Like I said, my name is Ray Ramos, aka Happy Harry Hardon. I do have a stream as well on Wednesdays and Friday, Sunday nights, and we usually do talk about paranormal stuff as well, comic books, a lot of pop culture, stuff like that, movies, stuff that we're interested in. As far as cryptids and paranormal, I guess stuff, occurrences, I've been very interested since I was a kid. Um, it's quite an evolution as far as the stuff that I've seen, the stuff that I've experienced, I guess you could say, and it's always interested me. And I guess it's something that we all have inside of us. Once we do experience something that seems off, that doesn't seem to jive with the reality that we're used to, especially if we're very grounded and do our do everything that we're supposed to do as people, go to jobs, go to school, pay our taxes, raise our kids, all that stuff. And then when something happens that's not what we're used to, it kind of opens up your eyes to other things. And it's always fascinated me, not only my own experiences, but listening to other people's experiences as well.
It's weird how that usually is how it works for all of us. We usually start out, um, at a young age with these sort of occurrences. Don't you agree, Diego?
Yeah, I
Like,
certainly do.
like personally, I remember, when I was in elementary, the first thing I would go when I would go to the library is I would go straight to the supernatural and paranormal section of the library and always check out, what they had, whether it be Bigfoot or ghosts or anything I could get my hands on. I would I try and read everything I could.
Yeah, as a kid, I also remember like going to the libraries and picking up like horror stories and stuff like that, like about the paranormal and cryptids. And I remember even buying a book called Chupacabra and stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, I mean that's what pretty much ends up happening. We kind of tend to latch onto something from childhood or like an experience or even a movie or something that when you're a kid kind of left an impression on you. My gateway into all of this was Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead was the movie that kind of like scared the living crap out of me, but at the same time it fascinated me. Yeah, and I couldn't get enough of it after that. But at the same time, I was afraid of it, and I started seeing things like how like the mind plays tricks on you at night. As a kid, I would see these things come out of my room and in the backyard and all this other stuff. And then slowly, I started realizing that there were things in my backyard, that there were things in my room that I didn't have any explanation for. And it wasn't until later on in life when other people experienced the same experience that I had that I was like, wait a minute, I wasn't crazy. I did see something. Something was there. It's nuts.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, right. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our first question, actually.
Hmm.
So since you already mentioned your first introduction in the field of cryptozoology and paranormal, let's go into okay. So as a because I know you're a researcher as well as a
Hmm.
investigator when it comes to this sort of phenomena. Uh, as a fellow researcher, how has your view on either cryptozoology or the paranormal phenomena changed over the years as you've experienced more stuff?
When I first had my first experience that like legit, like, and I wasn't the only person in the room that had this experience. At first I was like, what the hell did I just happen to me? But after after a few years looking back on it, talking about it to the people that experienced it with me, then I started realizing, like, wait a minute, like, there's something there. Even if it wasn't what we all think it was, something did happen. Something occurred that was paranormal. Something occurred that is not explainable. We can't just either through science or anything else that you can think of through rationality, whatever you want to call it. This was otherworldly. This was something that has a hard time fitting into the reality of this world. And that experience that I first had with the paranormal to that level was with La Llorona.
Okay. Okay. So okay. So uh, let's go ahead and jump into that encounter then, since you brought it up already.
Okay. Um, so when I was about 12 years old, so I'm an old timer. I'm not gonna, gauge my age or anything like that. But let me just tell you, I'm an old timer. My sister, if you guys are familiar with El Paso, you guys know where Moon City is, right? More or less.
Uh, I'm not familiar with it. Are
Yeah,
you,
No.
Diego?
no.
No. Okay. You guys remember the? I don't know how old you guys are, but there was an amusement park called Magic Landing. You guys remember that?
Oh, we're Zoomers.
Yeah, we're
We
really
don't.
Oh,
young.
no,
We're
no
younger
worries,
than
brother.
you.
No worries. It's all good. So there was this amusement park named Magic Landing. It was off I-10. Right now, it's like a semi truck, I guess, warehouse or something. That's where they store semis. But Magic Landing, behind Magic Landing, there was like a cliff area that went down into a little valley. And in that valley, there was a lot of people that were living in that neighborhood. Now, during this time, it was like in the mid 80s. My sister had lived out there with her husband, of course, and her children, and they lived on her husband's mother's, which is her mother-in-law's property, and they had a small garage that they converted into their home. Now, when you went to visit them, you had to go down Socorro Road, and you can still go to the house to this day. I just went a few weeks ago to show my wife because I've always told her this story. Um, so if you go down Socorro Road, you turn on left on Moon Road, and it'll take you to this area. Um, and the house is still there. The garage is still the same. So they had converted the garage, and when you drove up to the house, the garage was this big cinder block built garage, and it had a heavy oak door on the front. I'm trying to paint you a picture so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. So when you drove up immediately, if you were inside the house, inside the garage area, the lights from the car, if you were driving up at night, would shine in eerily through the cracks in the cinder block. That's just something that I want to put out there so you remember as we get back into the story. So, my brother-in-law, he had bought a satellite dish. So this is how old this story is. He had bought a satellite dish, and back in the day, in order to watch stuff on satellite, you had to wait to a certain time of night or day in order to aim the satellite dish in the direction of the satellite that was transmitting the information or whatever. So we he invited me over this one weekend, and like I said, I was about 12, and he said, "Hey, you want to come over and watch the Playboy Channel?" And I was 12. I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to go watch the Playboy Channel. I'll check out titties and stuff. It's awesome." So my sister managed to arrange it with my parents. I went over there, and I remember the way that the her house was set up is, there was those cinder blocks in the front. There was the big oak door. As soon as you walked in through the door, immediately to your left, there was another door that led into their backyard. In the backyard, there was a bunch of dogs that his mom had. Now, Directly in front of you there was their living room. Everything was kind of shotgunned, as far as the plan for the little house. So as soon as you walked in, there was a living room with two sofas, one facing the wall, or facing, as soon as you walked in, and the other one against the wall, kind of like an L shape, and the TV was right there. And then you went through a little like arch area. There was the kitchen, and then you went to the back, and there was the master bedroom. Behind, in the master bedroom, there was some big windows. Behind the windows, there was a little bit of the backyard, a rock wall, and then directly behind the rock wall, there was a canal, huge canal, because all that area was farmland. So they used the canals, of course, for irrigation. So I went, we hung out most of the day, and then at night, the kids went to sleep. I had, my sister had three little ones. So they went to sleep. She went to sleep with them, and me and my brother-in-law, being mañosos, being cochinos, we decided to stay up and wait till that time so that we could watch the Playboy Channel. So we're watching it. He's having a quart, like he was drinking his quart, and I was sitting there, and we started watching it, and it was around midnight when it actually officially started. Like you could actually get the reception for the channel. We started watching it, and sometime between one and maybe 2 in the morning, we passed out. Both of us passed out, and I passed out on the couch. So I was not facing the door. I was like on the other side, on the other couch, facing the TV. And all of a sudden, around, I don't know, I want to say it was maybe 3 in the morning. Of course, it has to be 3 in the morning. I hear loud knocking on the door, like loud knocking. I can't even like imitate how loud it was, like pounding on the door. And the dogs are going nuts. The dogs are barking like crazy. And I sat straight up on the couch and I was looking around and I didn't notice whether or not my brother in law was there or not. And I sat straight up and I kept hearing the pounding and the pounding on the door, like, someone was trying to get in, someone was knocking. And I got up and I started walking towards the door to open it to see what was going on. And this was not a dream. This was actually happening. This was, what was going on, because I can still remember the sights, the sounds, the smell, everything. So I get to the door and I'm reaching for this door. And like I said, it was a huge, heavy wooden oak door. I'm reaching for the handle. And as I reach for it and I put my hand on the handle, my brother in law sits up on the couch. He sits up and he starts screaming at me. And the dogs are going crazy. He had to scream because the dogs were so loud. He had to scream and say, "Stop. Don't open the door. That's La Llorona. If you open the door, she'll come in here and take us all." And I was like, "What the hell? What the hell are you doing, man? What the hell are you talking about?" And as soon as he said that, as soon as like he stopped talking, I heard it. This thing on the other side of the door. And a lot of people had told me like, "Oh, it was someone playing a prank. It was maybe it was his mom, like trying to scare us or something." But no, it wasn't. It was not, because this thing made this sound that even to this day, like I'm talking about it, I'm getting chills. It made this sound like someone with so much despair in their cry, just guttural, just crying. And it just started wailing, and it started wailing. And when it did that, the dogs shut up like that. They stopped barking and they started whining. And my brother-in-law sitting there, and I'm frozen in place with my hand on the door. Like, I had this overwhelming feeling. I can only call it a compulsion. I was compulsed to open the door. I wanted to see what it was. The thing that scared me the most of the situation, and to this day I remember, and it still like haunts me, is not so much the wail of what I call La Llorona. It was the breath that it took after it wailed. So it's crying, and I can't even imitate it. It's crying. It's going, it's doing its moan, and then it stops, and you hear it. It goes, it took a breath. It took a breath, and it was like someone trying to breathe underwater. You could hear the gurgling. You could hear the sound of lungs that are like filled with liquid trying to get a breath. And that scared, like, even talking about it right now, man, I'm like, even talking about it right now, I'm like all like weirding out. And that scared the living crap out of me. And that compulsion just kept driving me to open the door. And my sister popped out from the back of the room. I guess she finally woke up from all this screaming and yelling and the dogs. And she's like, "It's happening again." And I'm like, "What? Again? What are you talking about, people? Like, you live with this? Like, this is like a regular occurrence? What the hell is going on?" And she told me like, let go of the door and come sit down. And it registered in my head, but I didn't want to do it. But as soon as she said it, whatever it was outside stopped. And these huge, I can only describe them like sun. I can only describe it as sunlight. This huge, like bright light, like the way the sun illuminates in the morning when it's first coming in through the window, started coming in through under the door and through the cracks in the cinder block, and it was eerie. It came in, and it was just like shooting these rays of light throughout the whole inside of that front room. And I was able finally, when that happened, to let go, and I went and I sat back down on the chair, on the couch. I was just sitting there, and I sat there, and it seemed like forever. And finally, the lights dimmed. It was weird. It was like they just dimmed out. Like the sun set and it just dimmed out. And after that happened, the dogs started barking again. Like the dogs were back on cue. They started barking. My sister went and sat down with my brother-in-law. He started drinking what was left of his quart. I'm just sitting there in shock, and they didn't say anything else after that. They were just like, okay, and they went back to bed. They went back to bed. My sister went back to bed. My brother-in-law turned on the TV again, started watching whatever, and I'm sitting there in shock. I'm like, what the hell just happened? What the hell was that? And I kept asking him, and he's like, don't worry about it, man. Just go to sleep. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it some other time. Don't worry about it. Just go to sleep. So that experience that I had as a 12-year-old. And then later on in life, I did ask my sister and my brother-in-law, and they were like, yes, that would happen frequently at that house. That's the reason, one of the main reasons that we moved out, because we would see so much stuff and so many things would happen inside the house and outside the house, in the backyard, in that canal area. That whole area is just, it's, to this day, it's still kind of desolate. Like there's not a lot of people. The streets are not paved. They're still kind of like rock streets, like gravel. So that's the situation that happened there. But they did confirm it. They were like, yeah, it happened. It did happen to you. You were 12, and this was me talking to them later on when I was like 18, and they're like, yeah, it happened, and it would happen a lot to us, and we just got to the point where we were done, and we didn't want anything to do with it. My sister has passed on now, and so has my brother-in-law. So I don't really have them, to kind of like talk to them anymore about it. It was just that one time when I was 18 that they confirmed it. But to this day, that house is still there, and that whole area is still very, very creepy. And when you go at night, it's even more, I guess, terrifying. I guess if you want to call it that. So that was the first experience I ever had with any sort of cryptid, any sort of with paranormal. I consider the Yorona a cryptid because a lot of people say that it's flesh. It's flesh and blood. It's like, or she is flesh and blood, and she has like a manifestation. She's not a ghost. So that's why I consider the Yorona a cryptid. But that was the first time that I had that experience.
Okay, right. So before we get on to your other encounters, we're gonna go ahead and give you some questions. Do you have any, Diego?
Yeah. Did you ever like go back just to like ever make sure like what actually happened? Were you like doubting it at one point?
Oh yeah, I doubted it like all the time, especially like after, when I was 15, 16, when I was in high school, when we drive back to that place, and my sister was no longer living there, like when I was 17. um, they had already moved, and I stood there like in that area, and I would walk around, and the canal is there. And they said that it's kind of difficult for me to describe it because of that whole Magic Landing thing. The Magic Landing thing, the amusement park was up for a very long time. During that time, it closed down because of some situation that happened, also paranormal situation that happened, that I heard about. But when you went to that area where the field was, where you could look up and see the amusement park, that whole area, there was like burnt out circles. It was pretty much like, something was going on. There was rituals. There was something going on. You'd find dead animals that were burned up. Like weird symbols on the trees. It was like a grove, I guess, near the canal. So whoever was doing this stuff lived in that area, obviously, because it was very accessible if you lived there. But yeah, I walked around that whole area, looked at stuff. During that time, I didn't have, we didn't have phones or anything like that. If not, I would have taken pictures. But like I was telling you earlier, A few months ago, I took my wife out there and we drove around at night. I should go during the day, but we went at night, and it's still there. I mean, that house is still there. That whole area is still kind of unchanged.
Okay, what I found really interesting when you were describing your encounter is that most of the time when La Llorona is mentioned, usually, very rarely does it, happen well at a household, and that really, that really surprised me, because most of the times, it's always, but when somebody's standing next to the river, or something along those lines. That
Mhm.
that really, stood out to me, and that really, that makes me wonder,
The thing about that also that made me wonder, because I asked myself the same question once I started doing this research. Um, I asked my sister like if she had seen it other times because she had mentioned it. Like, what did she see? And she said that she usually saw whatever it was in the backyard. And like I said before, in the backyard behind the rock wall, there was a canal. There was an irrigation canal. So I put two and two together. I'm like, oh, okay, well, they have the water source right there. It's near the water. And she described her. I keep saying her, but I mean, I don't know if you want to put it as a her or put a gender on it. But I keep saying her because she said that she described her as being a woman that had not so much like a veil or anything like that, but she had very dirty hair around her face, and she could see her eyes were very sunken, like if she had been crying a lot, and her clothes were kind of dirty as well, like she had been like rolling around in the dirt. And at first I was like, oh, it was just some bum or whatever, just living in the field or something that you saw. And she's like, no, but every time I saw her, it was the same thing. Like she would not change. It would not change. So, I mean, I wish I could ask her more questions. Like I said, she's passed on. I do know this much though. During that time, when I would go visit her, my sister and my brother-in-law, there were a lot of like questionable things, I guess, that they were doing. I mean, of course, they were doing drugs, they were, smoking out, whatever. But they had like a lot of occult books, books that I had never seen before. It was the first place that I actually read like what I guess what people would consider the Satanic Bible. So I don't know if they were conjuring. I don't know what they were doing, but I feel like whatever I experienced there followed me back to my home, and that's when I started seeing more stuff and experiencing other things at my parents' house. So that's, I mean, I just wanted to add that in there as well.
Now, you mentioned the occult artifacts that you had found in your sister's house. Uh,
Mhm.
I definitely, now this is just my opinion. I definitely believe that you also mentioned they were doing drugs and such, correct?
Yes.
I believe, now this is just again my personal opinion, that
Yes, of course.
the negative, the negative emotions that were or negative happenings that were happening at that location are it attracted whatever it is that you experienced,
Hmm.
and I
No,
that's
definitely.
it, uh, what do you think, Diego?
It definitely, like, there's no other way to see it because just it's sketchy, honestly. Like the occult things that were just there, you kind of have to put two and two together.
Mhm. Well, I mean, check it out, guys. Like the reason that I said that it followed me, is because when I went back home, or when I, started less and less being there at my sister's house and just being at home, I started witnessing a lot more things at my parents' house. And once again, the house that I grew up in is near the border highway, and the river is right there. The river's right there. I could throw a rock and hit the border highway. That's how close I am. Or my parents' house was close to the border. Um, and not only that, and like I said before, nothing is off limits. You can ask me whatever you want to ask me. My parents were very shitty to each other. They had a relationship where I felt that my either my father or my mother should have divorced one or the other. They should have not have stayed together for the children because all they did was bring this negative energy, like Diego said earlier, or Charlie, I'm not sure who said it, but all they did was bring this negative energy into the house and it would not leave. They just kept feeding it year after year after year. And it just kept growing and growing and growing to the point where it became a vortex. I could feel it in the house. Like you walked into the house and it was not a very comforting feeling. And then that just spurned other things that I witnessed. My parents had their house blessed. I counted 4 times. They brought a priest in, they said prayers, they blessed all the corners of the house, and then things would calm down for a little while, and then it would stir up again. Stuff would happen again. So yeah, I
Right.
mean that just leads into something else. Another story right there.
Yeah, Ray, I'm gonna have to. Sorry for cutting you off a little bit, but
No problem. No problem.
so one thing, you probably know this by now because you're a fellow researcher, but one thing that it took me a while to understand is that you know, like you said, what was it? Uh, the house was blessed, correct? Um,
Yes.
a total of 4 times. See, blessings can only work so long as a person has faith. You know,
Hmm.
that's what I've figured out. Through my own personal struggles with the paranormal. It's a blessing. It's like a temporary fix. It's like flex tape. You just put it on. It sticks for a little bit. It'll come off sooner or later, and that's how I figured. You know.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask was, when you said like things followed you back home, like what exactly followed you back home? Like, was there certain like appearances that you would see?
Yes. There was a lot of like I said, there was a lot of negative energy. Whatever I guess experienced at my sister's house, I feel had like some sort of latched on to me because I started seeing like figures. I started seeing shadow people. I have experienced the Hat Man. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that guy.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
very familiar.
yeah, I've experienced the Hat Man. But the shadow people was what took the cake, man. Like that, even talking, like I said, man, I started talking about this stuff and I start getting like all these you know feelings again, and it's crazy.
Ray,
And the craziest, I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say if you need to, if you're experiencing, over emotions, you just let us know and we can take a break from it.
No, you're good, you're good. I'll tell you, it takes a lot, man. It takes quite a bit. Like I said, I'm super into like horror. I'm into horror stories, everything. So I don't want to say I'm desensitized, but I do get those feelings back. Like like what are they called, ñañaras? Like I get the ñañaras real quick, like real bad, and hey. And then my wife is like walking around right now and she's listening to me tell these stories. So she's like, oh man, you're talking about this because she experienced things as well when we were living with my parents, when we were just first getting together. But it all started with that. I think it started with the experience at my sister's house. I started living with my parents more, staying there more often. It got to the point where in my I guess pre 20s, I didn't want to be at home anymore. I just wanted to go there, try to get some sleep, and then leave as soon as possible. As soon as the morning came, I didn't want to be there at home because, like I said, my parents were very, very shitty to each other, and these things would tend to manifest themselves once they had had like an argument or they had had like a blowout or something. But the shadow people, now, if you want to get into that, I can tell you stories about that, man. That stuff was really, really bad, really bad.
So, you mentioned the shadow people. Like, are
Wait, wait. Before we get into that, because he has another story.
oh,
Before we get into that one. But let's keeping on the subject of La Llorona. Um,
Mhm.
so oh, jeez, I already forgot.
No worries.
No, okay, okay. So when so do you believe that that the attachment you got from your sister's house, do you think Do you think it? I don't know how to word properly phrase this. Do you think it made things worse for you than it was when you were prior to the encounter?
I honestly think that it took advantage of the situation. It like caught a ride, I guess you could say. Whatever was there, caught a ride, went to my house where it was already bad, and it just like, oh well, this is exactly what I want. I'm gonna take up residence here and see what I can stir up. Um, there were times when I would hear, moaning outside my window. I would hear chains. That's the crazy part. Like I would hear chains, and we didn't own any chains. And the next door neighbor, like he had his little garage, but he always had everything locked up. But the way that those houses were so close to each other, um, you could immediately hear somebody like walking around outside if I had the window open at night when I was growing up. But I would hear chains. I would hear moaning. I would find weird stuff around the house. Like I said, my parents were very, very bad to each other, and my mother, um, like she would make it a point to try, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it. They were supposedly she was devout, like Catholic, right? But when things started getting bad, I think she started looking into other like alternatives, and I would find like what are they called? Totems, I guess you could say. No, not so much totems. There's a word for it, but I can't remember what it is. Um, oh man, I'm thinking of the word. Let me see if I can remember. But I would find like stuff. This one time, I found in the backyard, and I was about 16, and I found in the backyard there was a raven. There was a raven that was dead inside a plastic bag, and I went up to it and I started like moving the bag around, and there was this weird blue liquid inside the bag. And I looked at the raven's head, and around its neck there was this big red ribbon tied around its neck, like super tight. And you could see the things, the bird's tongue like hanging out. So in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, this thing got strangled. Like, what's this all about? And the first reaction that I had, as a 16-year-old still living in my house, my dad wasn't around because he was always working. I went to my mother and I told her like, hey, what's this? What did I find? She had this look on her face like I had just, like told her like really bad news. Like I had, oh yeah, I'm pregnant or something. If I was a girl, I'd be like, oh, I'm pregnant. She had that like pale, like she had just gone pale. And she's like, she told me exactly what I needed to do. She's like, I had barely gotten my license too. She's like, you need to get that and leave it in the bag, take it and go burn it and then dump it where there's running water. And I'm like, what? That's like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, yes, take it, drive somewhere where there's running water and burn it in a can, do whatever you need to do, and then dump it in the water. And that's it. That's what you need to do. It's like, okay. And, being the only one living there at the time, my brother, my sister, like I said, they were out of the house. I did what she asked. But being a 16-year-old, I was like, forget this, man. I'm not going to go through all that trouble. I'm not going to go burn this thing. So I went to a canal, once again, that was nearby, and I just dumped the thing in the canal, in the water. And that was it. I was done. I went back. I told her, yeah, I burned it. I got rid of it. It's good. We're good. Um, but it wasn't that. I think I did something that just kind of screwed everything up even more. Because after that, that's when I had more, I guess, appearances from like shadow people. A lot of negative energy um, seemed to manifest itself even more in the home. My parents got into more arguments. Um, things went from bad to worse after that situation, and that one situation sticks in my head a lot because it seemed like she was very specific and she knew exactly what she needed me to do. I remember one time my mother went to a santera as well, and the santera told her that my dad was cheating on her. My parents had me very late in life, so uh, my mom had me when she was like 45. So she was already about hitting 60 when when I went with her to the santera. I was about 16 around there somewhere, and I remember the Santera told her specifically, you need to go and get your husband's underwear and make a doll out of it and put it somewhere in the house where he cannot find it, and that way you will bind him to you and he will not cheat on you. And I'm like, my dad, really? My dad was all about the family. My dad was all about just going to work and coming home, drinking a beer, and going to sleep. That's what my father did. Never, not once did I ever experience anything with my dad that would lead me to believe that he would cheat on my mother or anything like that, or that he had a wandering eye or anything like that. So my mom, I guess, did it, but I wasn't aware of it. And it wasn't until years later, um, once my father had passed away, I think, that we found it. We found this thing in the house that was my dad's underwear tied up in a little doll, and it was like in this crawl space in the attic, and like no one would ever have thought of looking there. But my mom was into some shit as well, I would think. Like I said, it was a lot of negative energy, a lot of different stuff going on in the house, and all these stories, just now that I'm talking about them out loud once again, um, they seem to be lining up. Like everything seems to be lining up in a certain way. So you guys are piquing a very strong interest in me to go back and analyze all this stuff again in my own life that I kind of just like dismissed, you know. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Um, but yeah, man, like stuff like that, that spawned, I think, from the Llorona encounter, because if you want to call it that, the Llorona encounter.
Um, I, I, I'm glad we can help you out in however whichever way we can, Ray. Diego, you had something, didn't you?
I was gonna. Well, now that I've heard about the raven, it kind of sounded like an offering, like a sacrifice or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Something like definitely ritualistic.
Okay,
Yes.
I have my own thoughts on that too. It differs from yours tremendously, Diego. Um, I believe that the it wasn't a ritual. It wasn't an offering per se. It was more of a somebody who was trying to do something to your family, Ray. You
Ah,
know,
okay.
via like with with witchcraft.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's witchcraft is the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about the raven and how you found it in a bag with a blue liquid and the red ribbon around its neck. Um, you know how here in the borderland there's a lot of it's basically entwined with our culture, you know, in a sort of weird way. But personally, I do believe that maybe your mom had or somebody in your family had you know messed with the wrong person at some point, or you know even a little grievance, and was enough to set this person to go. All right, you know what? I'm gonna try and conjure something and throw it at them. You know, that's my
Mm-hmm.
what I personally believe might have you know been because of it, of a whole
I mean,
raven
that
in a
makes
bag.
sense as well, but I never really thought about it like that. Like, oh shit, who did they piss off? Who did who would go to this extreme? So that's interesting that you bring that up. I never really considered that.
Yeah, it's it's a little out there, but we have to acknowledge it since you brought up Santeria earlier, you know, which is
Mm-hmm.
also very prevalent here in the borderland. You know, I thought it would be a nice little thing to bring up.
Cool, no problem,
Okay,
man. That's cool. Sorry, go ahead.
no. So right now, unless we'll get back to the topic later down the interview, but for now,
Mm-hmm.
let's go ahead and jump into your shadow people encounter.
Oh man, yeah, that one. Okay, so where do I begin? Like my whole life growing up at my parents' house, I've always experienced these. I mean, the only way I can put them is shadow people, um, and it always seemed like they were around. Um, they never really left, even though the priest would come to the house and there was blessings on the house. They would calm down for a bit, and then they would reappear. Uh, and it's weird. It's like that whole area where the house was used to be farmland as well, and it was right up against the river before the border cut it off, or the border highway cut it off. So there used to be like areas of woods and stuff like that. So I always seemed to attribute it to that. Like, oh, whatever was here before, this is what's causing it. It wasn't until later on when I started having all the experiences that I was like, no, wait, these are my parents because they're kind of jacked up to each other. So that's what's drawing it in. Um, and it always seemed like my house was dark. It always seemed like when you showed up at my house, there was a cloud like hanging over it. My wife is sitting right next to me. She's like agreeing with me. Um, and it was something that you couldn't just like dismiss, like you couldn't ignore it. So when I was growing up, I would see these shadows. They would walk up and down the hallways. They would stand in the corners, even if you had the light on. And I'm sure you guys have seen video like that. You have the light on, and in the corner, there's just something that's out of place. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Ghosts of Carmel, Maine YouTube channel.
No.
No, unfortunately, we do not.
No? Okay, so really, really quickly, there is a channel, of course, it's called The Ghosts of Carmel, Maine. This man lives in this house that used to be, I guess, a mortuary, and he experiences shadow people. And the way that he records these things, because he's recorded full bodied apparitions, he's recorded a bunch of EVPs, stuff like that. What he sees is exactly what I would see growing up. These things moved, the only way I can describe it, like venom, like the comic book character Venom.
Mm-hmm.
When the symbiote detaches, that's the way these things would move. They seem to like just not so much crawl, but just like shoot out or dissipate and then pop up somewhere else. Whenever I would see like full bodied apparitions of shadow people walking up and down the house, it was really fast. Like you could see, like this one time I remember um, there was a white one, and I've never ever heard of anyone talk about this that I know of white shadow people. Like imagine, okay, so when you look at someone, if you stare at someone or something for a very long time and you focus like your vision on that, and then you look away and you still see kind of like I guess the image, but it's in white. It's like a negative, right? Um, that's the only way I can describe these apparitions. They were like negative shadow people. They were white. They looked luminous, and they would walk up and down the hallways as well, along with the regular, dark shadow people. There was this one shadow, white shadow person, I guess, that we would see. My parents would see it. I would see it, and this is before I met my wife. I was still living there at home, watching them because, like I said, they were up in age, so I was just keeping an eye on them. Um, and it would stand in the corner, and it would move around, and it would follow my mother around. And it's funny because my wife is always saying, that saying. I don't know if you guys have heard it, "La cosa mala nunca muere," or "hierba mala nunca
Yeah.
muere."
Yeah.
Um, that's the way that a lot of people describe my mother. My mother is a force to be reckoned with to this day. She's still alive, but she always had this intensity about her. Like, don't fuck with me. Like, I am who I am, and that's it. But this thing would follow her around the house, and it seemed to be more bonded to her or following her around. And I remember this one time, it was standing in the corner in the kitchen. It was just standing there, and you could see it. You could see like this luminous form just sitting or standing there. And my mother was watching TV along with my dad, and like I guess it kind of like got to her. Like she finally was fed up, and she turned and she yelled at it. And I was sitting in my room, and I came out because I had already seen it. I was sitting in my room, and I came out because she started yelling at it, and she said it in Spanish, but what she said was basically, "I don't know what you are. I don't know what you're doing here, but if you're good, stay, and if you're evil, get the hell out of my house." And after that, I never saw it again. It disappeared. We would see the shadow people, but we wouldn't see the white shadow walking around anymore. So I don't know what that means, other than the obvious. But that was one of the experiences with that. Um, the rest of the time, it was usually just I hate to say it this way, but you're running run of the mill shadow people. The Hat Man, I saw him a few times actually. Like I said, they would move like venom. They would go over the walls outside into our neighbors' yards. They would come back. There was a few times that I would look into the backyard because my room at the time, you it had a window towards the backyard. and you could see outside, and you would see them congregating around in the backyard, and literally it looked like they were swarming, like they were like just walking around in the backyard like sharks, like just swarming around in the backyard. And it was bizarre to see like these things all the time, just kind of, I guess, shadowing us, if you want to call it that. My friends would see them. My friends experienced it. They would not want to go after dark to go, pick me up or to go hang out at my house. If ever I went out after dark with them, they would pick me up and they would leave immediately, or they would ask me to be waiting outside for them because they had had these experiences with these things. Um, and then when I met my wife and she moved in, she also experienced these things. She would see shadow people sitting there in the dark, and it would look darker than the darkness, and you could tell that it was staring at you. And she would wake up, and she would have that immobilization. I forget what it's called, but when you wake up and you're frozen, the sleep
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 paralysis.
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 Mhm. She would have that, and I would experience that a few times. There was a few times I would wake up from this in sleep paralysis, and these things were like just there in my room, like looking at me, um, and it was crazy. And the thing is, and I remember like I would leave the TV on or I would leave the lights on because these situations would happen, and it didn't even matter if the lights were on or the TV was on or the radio or anything like that. It would be freaking like 3, 4 in the morning, and I'd finally pass out, only to wake up a few minutes later and have these things in the room with me, and I would be like frozen in bed, like what the is happening. And I did a few messed up things when I was a kid, when I was growing up, and I think one of them that attributed to all this as well was, and like I said, no judgment, right? No judgment. Um, I actually did go to a church, and I attempted to renounce God. I did do that one time. The only reason that I was stopped was because there was a friend of mine from school that was there, and she actually stopped me from doing that. She prevented me from actually going through you know, the whole, I guess, if you want to call it a ritual or whatever, the whole drama. She said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want nothing to do with that. That's like the bad road. You don't want anything to do with that. She talked me down, and I left, and I didn't do it. But the thought was already there, right? The intention was already there, and I think that also like excelled everything to the point where it got later on in life.
Okay, great. So you mentioned that you would see these shadow people. They would move erratically in the backyard. Was it any chance anywhere near where you found the bird?
Yes, actually, it was in the corner. They would congregate there as well. It was always to the. I mean, if you were facing the house, I guess it would be to the right of the house more than to the left of the house. My room was on the left hand side of the house, and they always seemed to be like closer to that corner where I had found that, I guess, offering.
It's strange how it correlates, huh, Diego?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
you're telling us all these bits of information, and personally to me, it's like a puzzle. It's
Yeah.
coming together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's coming together, and it's crazy, man. To like, all these years I never really sat down. Me being a researcher, me being attentive to like detail, I always concentrated more on the outside than I did within my own situation. Like, talk to me about the Bigfoot that lives in Horizon. Talk to me about the Mountain Shadow Lakes that has like the Bigfoot living in it, or the horse lady that appears at Washington Park, or the statues that come alive in the Black Cemetery near Town. Talk to me about that stuff, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. But when it comes to my own stuff, it seems like I never really thought about it. I never really like went over it until now, until with you guys. So it's very cathartic. It's very interesting. So thank you guys for that once again, man.
Like I said, we're glad to help you with this, right? Diego, you were gonna say something, didn't you?
Yeah, I was gonna say something earlier. Like you did say that you had sleep paralysis or like stuff like that. What was like the scariest encounter you've ever had with a shadow person?
Oh man. I think the scariest encounter I ever had with one of those things was I was in my room and I had this like real I had real bad insomnia, and also like I said before, I would dabble into a lot of things. I would do a lot of stuff, a lot of occult, a lot of. Um, are you guys familiar with Carlos Castañeda?
Uh, that sounds familiar. Can you elaborate, please?
Carlos Castañeda was very big in the 70s. It was kind of like a not so much religious, but more spiritual kind of. I don't know if you guys know what a nahual is, a tonal, stuff like that. Very much rooted in the whole Aztec and Mayan belief that we are all spiritual beings, of course, and we can come to the point where we control our spirit to do amazing things. Witchcraft, basically, is what it is without calling it witchcraft.
Shaman.
Um, it's kind of like expanding your mind, blah, 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 doing a lot of peyote, stuff like that. So I was dabbling in that stuff at the time. And I remember this very, very vividly. We were trying to astral project, and it was me and another group of friends of mine. We all had like desires. We all wanted things out of life. Um, and in order to achieve that, during this time we had to, I guess, do our research, do our, learn from some place that didn't have books, in other words, like experience these things. So we were trying to astral project during this time, and I remember being in my room and going through the motions of trying to do the astral projection, and I was lucid. I remember being lucid. I was asleep, but I was lucid, and it seemed like these shadows were there. The shadows were there around me. I could see them out of the corners of my eyes. And in one of the teachings, it says that death is always to your right where your vision ends. Death is always there. And they say that if you turn fast enough, you can see your own death, but it'll take you like immediately. Boom, you're dead. You're gone. But it's always there. It's always there. Like you can see it like in your peripheral vision. So I saw these things in my peripheral vision, and that kicked into my head like, oh shit, what if this is death? But then again, why are there so many of them? There was a lot of shadow people in the room, and at the same time, I felt like rising from the bed. And during that time, I had a lot of posters on my ceiling, and there was this one poster that I had of the Cure, and I was focusing on the word, the Cure, and I could see it like slowly getting larger and larger in my vision, like I was going towards it, like I was getting closer and closer to the ceiling, and these things were right there with me, like going up, like ascending with me. And just as I realized, oh shit, I'm doing it, I like, I guess woke up, I guess you could say, and I literally felt like the physical sensation of landing back on the bed. Like I felt like I just landed on the bed. And I looked up and the Cure poster was on my ceiling and the lights were on. I didn't have any, I slept with the lights on because I was at that point where I didn't want to see anything. I was kind of, and to this day, I'm still kind of afraid of the dark. I'll admit it. Um, so I saw these things and then they were gone. The Cure poster was there, it was fine. The room was fine. The TV was on. Everything was fine. But it gave me this nasty, nasty feeling like if I had not woken up, honestly, in my opinion, I felt like if I had not woken up, one of these things would have gone and taken up residence inside me, I think. And that has stayed with me as well. Like, even to this day, man, like, I go to sleep and I'm afraid sometimes that something might happen in my sleep. I haven't had sleep paralysis in a very long time. I haven't lived at my house in a very long time. The house that my wife and I have now, is very chill. People say, it's very comforting. We try to keep out the negativity, of course, not just for ourselves, but for our kids. But I haven't had that experience in a very long time. But still, I have the idea in my head that what if it happens again? What if one of these things pops up again? So yeah, that was probably the craziest experience I ever had with a shadow person.
Okay, first off, I gotta say, great taste in music. I just gotta say. Um,
Awesome, awesome.
okay, so I was wondering. So you mentioned astral projection. For those who don't know what astral projection is, it's basically a. I would liken it to a. I wouldn't say a state of mind, but it's when your essence, your spiritual essence, leaves your body for a temporary time. And as you said, Ray, they the shadow people were crowding around you as you entered the first stages of it, and I do believe what you said is true. I do think that they were waiting for you to get far enough away from your body so they could take advantage, because it's like you said, it's an empty vessel, and if your spirit's not there to occupy it, they could they can surely just take it over.
Hmm.
What do you
That's
think, Diego?
definitely like that's the scary part about like that's the dangerous part of astral projection because it seems so tempting to try it and like oh I'm gonna have my spirit leave my body and just see what's around me and
I'm gonna
stuff like
vibe
that.
around.
Yeah, and like the scary thing is that like you could be inhabited by something evil. It's terrifying.
It is a terrifying thought. Now, Ray, this isn't like regarding your personal encounters, but more of your personal beliefs. Um, so I'm gonna list off certain types of spiritual entities, and I want you to go ahead and, based on your personal beliefs, what you believe is, like, I wouldn't say like weakest to strongest, but like you get what I'm trying to say here. It's like
Yeah,
you know.
like
Okay, so of course we have earthbound spirits. We have um, you know. Okay, so earthbound spirits, poltergeists, and then shadow people, demons, and fallen angels. In your personal opinion, where would you rank each one of them in place of severity?
honestly, I think Fallen Angels would probably be the worst of the bunch. Because they have that. I mean, the way that I see it, these I hate putting like a gender to them, but of course we're used to that, right? Because they're above that. I think they're above that. These guys were around during creation. These guys were around during a time when man was still, being, I guess, if you want to put it that way, created. Um, so they have that power. They helped in the creation of man. So to be a fallen angel and to have that much power where they can pretty much shape reality, that's like the most dangerous thing imaginable because they're free agents. You know what I mean? They don't have to answer to God. The Christian God, Catholic God, whichever God you subscribe to, Buddha, you know, any of them. They just do what they do and they just go on and on and on because these beings are eternal.
Okay, and so since that's your like number one top pick of most dangerous, let's continue down the list
Mhm.
on the matter.
Okay. After that, probably demons would come into play, of course, but they serve. They're not, like I said, they're not free agents. They serve. So they have whatever agenda is given to them in order to disrupt, to cause chaos, to do whatever it is that they want to do for a greater power. Um, After that, of course, poltergeists, I think, restless spirits, angry spirits, things that can actually cause you physical harm. Um, then shadow people, they're just negative. I think shadow people honestly are from a negative plane. They not so much hell, but another plane where it's just negative energy. They don't have the ability to physically hurt you, but they can coerce you into doing things or to suffering through great fear. stuff like that that you'll hurt yourself. Uh, so shadow people are up there. And what were the last two? You had another two, I think.
But the last one was Earthbound spirits, but those are they're really I wouldn't say docile, but they're like you know they're like the bottom rung basically. They're like the
Yeah, yeah.
we're not much of a problem. They're like we're just confused or something
Mhm.
along those matters. I just wanted to throw them in there just to add a little bit of spice, the spiciness. Um,
No, definitely. I mean, earthbound spirits are the ones that just they're not done. They feel that they're not done, and they just hang around. They're just trying to figure out what's the next step. I guess you could say.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were gonna say something,
Yeah.
Diego?
I noticed that you had said that like shadow people can coerce you to like be harmed. Have you ever been coerced?
Oh yeah, like plenty of times, man. Like I would get a lot of the negative energy, I guess, feedback from these beings. The house was always under this like cloud. It seemed like it was always foggy inside the house, or hazy rather. Just depressing, very depressing. Um, I hate saying it like this, but during that time, it was a great time for poetry because I wrote a lot of it. But I mean, I took up cutting. I took up, alcohol. I took up drugs. I took up all these things to try and dull the sensation of having this cloud hanging around me. Um, and it kind of like, it sucks because it's a manifestation that you can't really like grab onto and like shake and be like, hey, leave me the hell alone. It's just something that's around you all the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
like this impending doom, like all the time. So that's why I feel like it coerces you to do things to try and avoid its existence, in quotations, I guess.
Okay, I got two things to mention here. You mentioned that you feel personally that shadow people don't have the energy. I guess lack of description. They don't have the energy to attack people. I don't. I personally I differ with that statement
Mm-hmm.
because there is a well-known video. Well, not well-known, but in the paranormal fields, it's out there. There's a video on a CCTV camera in a hotel, and there's this guy. I'll send you the link if I find it. Hopefully, it doesn't
Yes,
bring
definitely.
back bad memories, but
No, no, no.
there's this guy just walking about his business in the hall, and you can see a black figure, starting to, it's going right at him, and it pushes him to the floor, and it pulls him by his leg for a good couple feet, and then just vanishes. I don't know if
I
you've
think I
seen
know
that
which
one.
one you're. Was it by like a stairwell? I think.
It's very vague in my
Yeah.
mind.
It
I
sounds
think I
very
remember
familiar.
watching
But
it
yeah, if you
too.
have the link, yeah, send it to me. I'd like to check it out and stuff.
Yeah, no, that really piqued my interest, and so that's why I kind of differ with you. But
Hmm.
it's really hard to classify what type of entity we're dealing with most of the time. Um, I also wanted to bring up the fact that you felt that shadow people weren't in the same plane. There is a well-known theory here in the paranormal community that they aren't spiritual, but they are rather instead interdimensional. They're ethereal
There you go.
in
Hmm.
in mind. Personally, I'm kind of in the middle of that whole idea. But
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that, Ray?
Honestly, I do believe that. Of course, I'm big on conspiracy theories into everything as far as paranormal is concerned, and the whole dimensional thing and interdimensional thing. Um, it does come into play. Um, there was this one theory a very long time ago. It's called, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, like the collective of unconsciousness. And they say that everything that has ever been thought and everything that is going to be thought or created, um, has already existed and already exists. This one also comes from the whole teachings of the Castañeda way, you know, believing that you're born with all the knowledge that has ever existed. It's just up to you to remember, which is like a crazy, crazy thing. But the collective consciousness holds all these things that have already happened. So I'm pretty sure that there's other dimensions, there's other worlds that we can't even fathom because our our little reptile brains just can't grasp it. Um, so yeah, I believe that yes, they might be interdimensional. They may be interdimensional. They're from another plane. That's the negative plane. They're observers. They come into this world, but at the same time, they need to, I guess, power themselves. And the only way that they power themselves is through negativity. If we ourselves power ourselves by, eating food, drinking water, having a comfortable home, then these beings are the opposite of that. They're negative energy. They need despair. They need, you know, causes for sadness and grief in order to power themselves and to continue existing. So they're drawn to these areas, these portals, these vortexes. I always considered my home like a vortex because of all the negative energy, like I said, that has just been accumulating over the years. And it's interesting because now that house is alone, like that house is empty, and my mother no longer lives there. My father passed away, a few years ago, and if you go to the house and you walk into the house, it feels desolate. Not so much sad, but empty. Like there's nothing there. There's um, like there's never been any life in the house. It feels that way. Like everything has just been drained completely out of the house. It makes me sad to think that because I live there, but someone just going into the house would be like, yeah, I don't feel anything. There's nothing here, you know? So I think that vortex or portal is no longer there. It's been run dry, and these things have moved on. So, because I haven't seen them in a very long time, ever since I lived there. So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. Since I'm gonna go ahead and presume that your parents didn't live there. They haven't lived there for a long time. Since these negative entities, the shadow people, since they didn't have any negative energy to feed on, they were like, "What the heck? There's nothing here, guys. Let's get out of here. Go to Chico's Tacos. Yeah, seal the deal."
one of the craziest stories that I have, really quickly. I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to tell you this story because it always sticks with me. Because once again, the validation that you're always looking for, like, what am I experiencing? Is it real? Is it happening? So my wife and I eventually moved out of the house. We left our parents to their own devices, or my parents to their own devices, figure it out, whatever. And my mother had gone to a point where she didn't want anything to do with my father. So she literally built her own house attached to the main house. And in order to get to her house, you have to go through the outside into the backyard. We always called it like the West Wing. Oh, yeah, Mrs. Ramos is in the West Wing. We can't talk to her right now. We need an appointment, whatever. But my dad was in the front of the house where his room was. And when we were living in an apartment, I would make it a point to go and visit him or her, whoever was there at the time, and just to check on them. So this one day, I went to go visit him, and it was during the day. And I walked in. My mom wasn't there. She wasn't in the West Wing or whatever. She had gone, done something. My dad was there, and I walk in. I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" Talking to him in Spanish, and in Spanish it sounds really bad. So if you need translation, I'll translate it for you. But I walk in, I'm like, hey, ¿qué pasó? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Qué está pasando? He's like, and he tells me straight out, ¿veniste tú ayer en la noche? ¿O esta madrugada veniste? Like, did you come this morning that, in like early morning? Were you knocking on the door? ¿Estabas tocando la puerta? I'm like, no vine. I didn't come visit you. So he goes on to tell me that around 3, 4 in the morning, there's like this loud pounding on the door. There's that loud pounding again. And he gets up from his bed and he goes and he opens the door and he says that this bulto negro, and that's what shadow people are called in Spanish, bultos negro, like the form of a person, came into the house and would not leave. And like, this is my dad. This is how, I guess, manly my father was. He's like, he started yelling at it. Apparently, he was yelling at, like, get out, salte, no estés aquí, no te queremos aquí, salte, salte, salte de mi casa, get out, get out. but the thing wouldn't leave. It just kept following him around. And he went and he said that he lied down in the bed in his bed and he kept yelling at it. And the thing came into his room and it was just standing there at the doorway. And I kept asking him, like, are you sure you weren't like sleepwalking? Are you sure, you were awake when this was happening? Were you not dreaming this? He's like, no, no, I remember this, I remember waking up and this was going on. And I was yelling at this thing to leave and it wouldn't leave. And I got tired to the point where I just rolled over and went to sleep. And I'm like, what? You just let this thing stay there and you rolled over and went to sleep? He's like, yeah, I was tired. Like, like whatever. And I'm like, man, you're insane, man, whatever. So I stayed there with him, talked to him, left. And that was it. Make sure he was fine. I left. Um, a few days later, I go back and my mom is there. And I go visit with her. And my mother, like I said, she doesn't like talking to my dad, or she didn't like talking to my dad at that time. She just left him to his own devices. I go visit with her in the back, and we're talking, and she's like, "Hey, did you show up a few nights ago, like real late at night?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Yeah, I heard pounding on the front door through the wall. I could hear the pounding, like someone was knocking, trying to get into the house. And then I heard your dad yelling, like yelling to get out. And I thought that it was you. I thought that you showed up drunk. I mean, were you here? Did you show up?" And I was like, holy crap. So that was the validation that I needed right there, that something had happened to them as well. So, it was just like little stories like this, like over the years, that just kept adding up and adding up and adding up. And now that we're talking about it out loud, it just, everything seems to be falling into place. You know what I mean?
Definitely. It's strange how, when we think about stuff, we're talking about it, uh, things start falling into place. It's like I said earlier. It's kind of like a
Like a
puzzle.
puzzle.
It's exactly like a puzzle. Um, okay, so as you said, I think that is one of the most trademark things of a Mexican parent. It's that that whole attitude, like, get out of here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly.
what I want to say is that sometimes that whole attitude can go one of two ways when it comes spiritually. One way, this is actually how sort of related, but not really. I personally wasn't a believer in this until recently. Um, so, like I said, that behavior can go one of two ways. One, it can make the whole situation worse by feeding it more negative energy, or two, it can actually intimidate whatever the entity is, and it leaves. And
Yeah.
this happened to us with a case we got about a week ago with I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the cryptid known as the I hate the name, but it's a name. It's called a dog man. Are you familiar with
Yes.
it?
Very,
Uh,
very much well read into the Dogman. Yes.
yeah, my personal favorite cryptid. But the witness that we had spoke to claimed it wasn't a physical manifestation of one. So it wasn't a physical flesh and blood being. It instead was a spiritual type being, and uh, it was me and my cohort here, Diego. We interviewed, and halfway through the interview, she kind of starts freaking out, and she's like, "Oh, it's here,"
Yeah.
and
Wow.
you know, and this is at a I used to be sensitive to these sorts of things, but with age, I kind of lost it. But my friend Diego here he's still sensitive to
Very sensitive.
to the paranormal, and he's like he's before she mentioned it, he had already started getting
A weird feeling, like
yeah.
chills, as I explain it. Like, I'll be sitting in a room and I can feel like really negative energy, and sometimes I'll get the chills, or like I'll get a really bad feeling at the back of my neck. And I'm anytime anyone's with me, like Charlie here, I'll tell him, I'll be like, hey, something feels wrong, or like it feels off. And that's when we kind of noticed, because this girl said she was into witchcraft and a bunch of other stuff. And
Mm.
That immediately raised
yeah.
flags. I was like into super pissed mode because I'm like, I told you, don't do this stuff. What are
Yeah.
you doing? Don't do that, please.
Exactly. And before she had started freaking out, I'd started getting a really weird feeling, and I was like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right." And then she had said that like it was there, and I was like, "Hey, I knew it."
And
Wow.
a little bit, uh, like we were at a public place because I like to do interviews in public. This way it feels more casual rather than anything else. We were going to the car, right? Because we personally know this witness, uh, and I since I kind of had a feeling that it was witchcraft oriented, which it actually
Mhm.
ended up not being, which is surprising. Um, I had religious artifacts with me in the car. I had a statue of Saint Michael. I had holy water, holy oil, incense, salt. Palo Santo.
Palo Santo.
A lot of different types of you know religious artifacts.
Mhm.
As soon as I brought them out, she immediately complained about it, and I'm like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's the
Bothered her.
correlation between the religious artifacts and the and her reaction. It was kind of weird, and not only that, but prior to picking up the witness, uh, uh, Diego here can attest. I was on the car ride over. I was playing Gregorian Chants, and
Mhm.
as you know, Gregorian chants, or if you don't know, for the audience also listening, Gregorian chants they were created by the Roman Catholic religion as the most sacred way to praise God. So
Mhm.
it's supposed to be like this whole really holy thing, and I had it on as we picked her up, and as soon as we did, the witness complained about lightheadedness and having
Wow.
a dark weight on her. It
Yeah.
was kind of I was kind of like, oh wow, that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But
That's damn, man. Like I would have loved to have been there with you guys for that. Um, just to try out some of the stuff that I kind of have picked up over the years when it comes to like witches and witchcraft and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, if you guys need like anything at all, I have some religious I guess items as well. I have some dirt from Salamayuca.
Oh.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but
Personally, no, but I have dirt from Chimayo, New Mexico.
oh,
If you
nice.
heard from
There you
that,
go.
so we both
It's
got
pretty much the same
our little
thing.
sacred thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have like a gallon of holy water. Same thing, we have it in the house because we're traumatized from the stuff that we've experienced, my wife and I. Uh and just to have these things gives us a sort of comfort, a level of comfort as well. I mean, you guys are actually going out there and seeking these things out, which is putting you in a whole other level. I'm
Oh,
like, oh shit.
yeah, no, definitely. At first, I didn't want anything to do with it. It's not until I started, I did something very stupid when I was well, I wasn't even a kid. I'm still a teenager, but it was when
Mhm.
I like maybe like 14, 15. You know, there was a long story short, there was a house with reported demonic activity in my
Mhm.
family's possession, and
Oh wow.
and I said, you know what? I'm gonna go check this place out.
Oh man.
And funny enough, we actually had a couple of investigators from the El Paso Paranormal. I forgot their name, but they're part of a
Mhm.
paranormal group in El Paso. We had them over to investigate, and I was there with them and another family member, and I remember the entire time I was there, I was being sarcastic, snarky, and just plain out rude to whatever was in the house, and that whatever was in there followed me back to my house
Oh
and
man.
caused chaos for a while, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience. So after that experience, I was like, I didn't have anybody to help me, with this type of stuff. So I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe I can try and help people the way I wanted, help myself.
Yeah.
And so basically, that's what kind of put me on the path. And I'm not too sure about Diego here, but that's what I
Well,
think.
the way that I got into this was, well, when I was young. I was really young, about maybe 5 or 6. My mom, she's extremely religious, and she said she has a gift. She can hear, see, and speak to like spirits and stuff, and she's always
Hmm.
tried her hardest to ignore them. And one night, she woke up screaming and kicking, and like she wasn't responsive. My dad was like trying to wake her up, like, hey, 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 come on, whoa, what's going on? And she woke up in the morning, and she said like there was like spirits grabbing her in her dream, and
Oh wow.
you could see like finger marks where they were grabbing her by her arms. And since then, I was like, wow, this is like scary. And like since then, I've always wanted to help people who've been in similar situations. Like, I wouldn't say set them free from the situation,
But like
but
like lift the burden, you
yeah,
know.
Yeah, like give them some insight on what they're experiencing and stuff. And
And you probably know this as well. You can only offer so much help to a person. It's up to
Mhm.
them themselves to actually want to get rid of whatever it is.
Oh,
It's
definitely. That's the way it works. I mean, if they're not willing to help themselves, then there's not a lot you can do. You can show them the door, but it's up to them to go through it.
exactly.
yeah.
Okay, so I think for the discussion, spiritual wise, unless I know you had a skinwalker encounter, so how are you doing for time?
I still got a few minutes, I believe. Let me look at the wife and see what's going on. Yeah, yeah, I still have a few minutes, like another 15 minutes.
Okay, so very quickly, let's. You said you had a well to transition us into this topic.
Mhm.
There's a question that I've always found intriguing, and I got this from another fellow researcher from New Jersey. He likes to ask this question a lot, and I'm going to ask you the same question.
Mhm.
So you know how in our national forests there are missing 411, correct?
Yes, I'm.
With
Oh yeah.
with David Paulides and his work. Do you believe that cryptids are responsible for the disappearances in our national parks?
Definitely, there is something. I mean, not just cryptids, but a lot of different things. I mean, the forests are unexplored. There's areas that we can't even get to. They're so remote. I mean, even what was it, like maybe last year or the year before? Those tribes that they live on islands that if you even approach them, they'll try to kill you and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's stuff out there, not just human, but both spirit and animalistic as well. And yeah, I mean, definitely, we've been watching that as well. And she had no idea until I started introducing her to that whole, the missing, the 411, the paranormal side of it, and all the sightings and stuff. So yeah, that I believe it. I believe there's something out there.
Okay. Okay. So I asked that question because it's an interesting one to think about. Um, so you had mentioned that you had a skinwalker encounter. Is that
Yes, that's.
something brief
I'm
that
sorry.
you
Go
can
ahead.
give us? Is that like a brief, or is that more of a longer topic?
I mean, I can tell you the brief version of it. If you want to have me back at some point in time to tell you more, then that's fine too. But the brief version will probably explain to you exactly like everything that happened. Um, when I was in college, when I was dabbling in all the stuff that I had mentioned earlier, I was made very, very much aware by my teacher, because I mean that's the only way we can call him, right? Our shaman teacher, that for all the good that we're trying to provide for our lives, there's people out there that are seeking bad, that are brujos, that are nahuales, that are negative energy manipulators, I guess you could say. They want stuff for themselves. They want self gratification and anything that will provide, and that includes like power over people. So us being the age that we were, we thought we were all chingones and we're learning and we're doing this stuff. Yeah, I had an out of body experience. I witnessed things. I can get in touch with the spirit and, elevate myself to a higher plane of existence where I can learn all this stuff. And there was this one guy, there was this one cat that I had grown up with, and I never really liked him. I never really liked him, and he didn't like me, and we just had this animosity towards each other. And he was native. He was Navajo. Um, and there was a situation when I was in school that there was a girl, of course, because there's always a girl involved, that I was dating, and he liked her. He wanted her for himself. And I, being the loudmouth and obnoxious guy that I am, I would make it a point to, flex in front of him and like tell him off in front of people, just make him look like a fool, um, whatever. I was young, I was dumb, whatever. And he would really take offense to it. He was always like, this guy, you're gonna get what you get, and this and that. There was one time we were at community college, and he was there, and he was with a group of friends, and I went up to him, and I just he was a poet as well, and during that time I was a poet too. We were writing poetry, and I went up to him, and I'm like, you know what, man, you don't know anything about writing, about poetry. You have no idea. You have no clue what you're doing. Whenever you want to actually learn how to write poetry, you come and see me, and I'll teach you. Because until then, you can call me daddy. I'm your father when it comes to that. That's how much of a asshole I was to him. So in a way, I kind of, I guess, deserved whatever I got in return. And he looked at me and he's like, "Is that how you want to play this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, fuck you, whatever, get out of here." So during that time we were learning, that night, it was a Friday night, we went out to the desert, and this was off of Joe Battle. This is before there was anything there. Uh, the only thing that was out there was the SAC, or whatever it's called, the stadium. So we went out there, and we went into the desert, and there was a group of us that was learning all these things, as far as nahuales and tonal, and the path is what they would call it, trying to elevate yourself spiritually. We're sitting out there, and we were drinking root beer. Root beer. That's what we were drinking. We weren't drinking beer. We weren't doing drugs. We weren't doing anything like that. We're just hanging out drinking soda pop. And we're hanging out there in the desert, all of us talking, had the music on, and then we start hearing dogs. We start hearing dogs barking at us. And the neighborhood was so far removed. It was at least a mile away from where we were at, or maybe more, that there was no way that we could hear dogs so close up to us, um, because of the traffic, because of the distance of the houses. So we were just hanging out, hearing these dogs, and then we started noticing that they were getting louder, they were getting closer, and there was a lot of them. So we're like, what the hell? And it hit us all at the same time. All of us experienced the same thing at the same time, which is even crazier. We all panicked. We all got this huge like burst of just fear. We jumped in the car and we drove off. We started driving through the desert trying to get back to Joe Battle so we could get on Joe Battle and get back to the neighborhood that my friend lived in. As we're driving, we have the windows open because it was summer, and I hear these, can only be called like footsteps running next to us. It sounded like there was animals chasing us. Even though we were going through the desert, you could clearly hear these things like chasing us, and we felt them like hitting the side of the vehicle. We felt these things hitting the side of the vehicle, like trying to ram into the vehicle, and we're freaking out at the same time. We didn't have the radio on. We were just listening. We were trying to get out of there, and everything was just escalating to a point where it was so overwhelming and loud that the barking, the animal sounds, just the pursuit. When we finally broke onto Joe Battle, everything stopped, and all the sound that was normal to us came back. We could hear the cars rushing by, and just the sound of the city. We went back to my friend's house. We were sitting outside his house, and we were discussing what had happened. And it seemed like we were all experiencing the same emotions. We all got furious. We all got pissed off, and we're like, "Fuck that! How dare that's happening to us? We're learning the path. We shouldn't be experiencing any of this stuff. We're stronger than this. Our shaman taught us what to do. Let's go back." Let's go back. And we convinced each other, and we got back in the car and we drove back to where we were at. And we're sitting there, like trying to, I guess, conjure to see if we could see, well, or listen to what had just happened. And we got this overwhelming feeling that something was staring at us. So we went out into the desert, like following something. It was this overwhelming sensation that it was leading us somewhere. And all of us, all seven of, there was like seven of us, we're all following. There was no clear path or anything like that. We're just following it out there. And we got to a point where there was this huge like bush, I guess, and it was very very dark. It was darker than the rest of the area, and it was nighttime, and there was a full moon, so the desert was illuminated. But this one bush was darker than the rest of the landscape. And as we approached it, we all froze at the exact same time. We froze and we started looking at the bush, and we looked down, and this is the part that we were like, what the hell are we experiencing? I looked down and you could see animal tracks, like they looked like dog prints, like paw prints, like leading up to the bush. But as you got closer, you could see where I guess this dog decided to get up on two legs and start walking because the strides were longer. And at the end, right where the bush was at, as we got closer, we could see, like in detail, where the foot fell and the heel fell behind it. And in the front, there was the paw, and in the back, there was a human heel print. You could see it clear as day. And like during, like I said before, like during this time, we didn't have phones. I wish we had a phone so we could take a picture, but we didn't. So it is what it is. We all saw this, and we got this overwhelming sensation once again of this fear. And the bush itself was so dark that we all turned around at the same time and started walking away, because we all were always taught whenever you experience something like that, whenever you get in the vicinity of something that is spiritually powerful, do not run. You know, it's that whole Last Unicorn thing. I don't know if you guys ever seen the Last Unicorn, but there's a part in it where the magician tells the unicorn, like, whenever you experience something immortal, turn around and walk away, because if you run, you will draw attention to yourself and it will hunt you down and it will kill you. So we all turned around and we started walking away from this bush. And as we're walking, everyone got this overwhelming sense of dread, and everyone bolted, man. Like they started running, and I'm yelling at them, like, don't run, don't run. We have to walk, we have to walk. But no, they're just running through the desert trying to get back to the car. And I'm like, you know what? They're leaving me behind. So fuck it. You know, I started running as well, and I caught up to them, and we all jumped into the car and we took off again. And once again, we had that sensation like something was following us, and it was just, you know, just keeping up with us. It wasn't bumping into the car this time, but it was keeping up with us. And we broke once again onto Joe Battle, started driving back to the house, and we immediately started to ground ourselves. And I think you guys know what I mean when I say that. When you start to ground yourselves, or like looking at something familiar, watching TV, you know, playing a video game, something that will ground you, so that we didn't have to think about that anymore. So we didn't talk about it anymore. We just left it alone. We're trying to get out of our minds. The weekend passed, and on Monday morning, or rather afternoon, because you know I was a, what do they call them? A scrub. Thank you, baby. A scrub. Yes, I was a scrub. So the next morning, or that morning, I went to the school, to community. I was walking around and I saw that guy. I saw that brujo, and I went up to him and I was about to tell him something like all chingon like I had before, and he gave me this look. Um, he gave me the Stanley Kubrick look, you know, like you put your head down and you look up and you get all, you know, psycho looking. He gave me this look, and I stopped and I looked at him, and he just tells me like, "So, did you enjoy your weekend? Did you like what I sent you?" And it was so ominous. It was so like full of like just spite and just maliciousness that I just froze, and I turned around and walked away, man. And I tried to avoid that guy after that, like for the longest time. I didn't want anything to do with it. So that was my experience with whatever I think it was. I think it was a skinwalker. I think it was something that he had conjured or that he had become, and that's the story.
That is a very interesting encounter. But since we are pressed for time, I would like to thank everybody for watching. Sorry, listening. to this podcast. Ray, if you could just stay on a little bit longer after we end the stream, not the stream, the podcast, it'd be we're just gonna get a couple things out of the way. Again, I would like to thank everybody, and please, Ray, if you want to go ahead and plug in any of your social media.
Socials.
Yes, of course. I am on all the platforms, I guess you could say, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I have a TikTok as well where I present like paranormal stuff that I find interesting. I call it my Crypt Talk. It's under the Cryptidnals, just like it's spelled. I don't know if you can see it on there or not, but it's C as in Charlie, Ryptidnals, and you can find me on all the platforms. Currently, I am getting ready to release a graphic novel, hopefully by the end of March. It's called The Cryptidnals as well, and it's about cryptids fighting tulpas. And I know you guys know what tulpas are, like the Slender Man and the Rake and the Black-Eyed Kids and stuff like that. So it's cryptids like the Dog Man or the Man Dog, La Llorona. For the first time, I'm making La Llorona an actual hero. So it's never been done before that I know of. La Llorona, Spring Hill Jack, um, Quetzalcoatl, an incarnation of Quetzalcoatl. They're all taking on, you know, these tulpas like the Slender Man and Bigfoot and stuff like that. So we're trying to cram as many cryptids and tulpas in there as possible. And that's up on Indiegogo right now. The pre-campaign is up on Indiegogo, and I'll provide you guys with the link so that way you can put it on there for the podcast if anyone is interested in signing up for the pre-campaign. We're giving away a free enamel pin when you sign up for the pre-campaign. And once the campaign launches, and the pins won't be available anymore. But it's kind of like a Wendigo skull. It's the logo for the Cryptidnals. So we're giving that away if you sign up for the pre-campaign as well. But yeah, I mean, you can find me on all that stuff. I'm pretty sure you can find me if you really look, like on Facebook and stuff like that. So I'm around, and hopefully you guys will ask me back because this was fun. This was really fun.
Yeah, no, definitely, Ray, definitely. So this has been the Cryptid Paranormal Committee. I was your host, Charlie,
And Diego,
and you're the co-host.
co-host.
And this was our guest, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you so much, guys.